Welcome, everybody. Simon Rosenberg here from Hopium Chronicles, and we are gathering in a happy time for the Democratic Party. It's been a remarkable few days. I mean, just 2 days ago, Joe Biden announced that he was not going to run for re-election. And in that very short period that we've been in, just 2 days, it's hard to believe, we've seen, the seamless transition to the new Harris for President campaign. We've seen her campaign raised more than $100 million. We've seen another set of commitments for $150 million, so $250 million, extraordinary amounts of money already committed. We've seen tens and tens of thousands of people sign up to be volunteers for the campaign. Many of them new first-time volunteers. We've seen this unexpected and very rapid coalescing of the Democratic Party around her as a leader. I don't think that was really anticipated. It was organic, it was powerful, it was enthusiastic, it was meaningful for all of us as a way of bringing us all together after what had been a bumpy patch in the family over the last few weeks. And today, as you know, the vice president has enough delegates pledged to be the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party. It's been a remarkable few days for us, and one of enormous hope and passion and enthusiasm, and also gratitude. I mean, I think that all of us, have the same powerful sense of gratitude to Joe Biden for his remarkable 50 years of public service, for being a proud patriot, a warrior every day for all of us, who led certainly one of the most consequential administrations in modern times, who has left the country far better than he found it. As you've often heard me say, Joe Biden inherited one of the worst first days of any president in American history. The country was reeling from Donald Trump's mismanagement of COVID. Hundreds of thousands of people had died unnecessarily. The economy was in free fall. We had just had our first time that the country had not had a peaceful transfer of power. There had been an insurrection against the United States, an armed attack on the Capitol. The capital city where I live had the National Guard patrolling for 50 days afterwards, after that attack on the Capitol on January 6th. Joe Biden had to go to work every day as an elderly man wearing a mask. And, imagine trying to work in a place like the White House where COVID was still running wild prior to the vaccines being distributed. It was an extraordinary, and there had not been a normal transition either, by the way. There had not been a normal transition from one administration to another. Joe Biden inherited one of the worst first days of any president in American history. And look where we are today, right? The economy is booming, stock market's breaking records. We have the best job market in America today since the 1960s. We've had more new businesses being formed every month than any time in American history, the lowest uninsured rate we've ever had. We had, up until recently, the lowest poverty rate in American history. Joe Biden's big three bills that he passed are going to be creating opportunities and jobs and for a generation to come, for young people in America for a generation to come. Inflation not only was zero in May, but it actually dropped in June. And over the last 6 months, it's been at the Fed target of 2%, meaning that we're sort of basically on the other side of this global inflation that came after COVID and due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and OPEC's continued raising of gas price and oil prices and trying to push gas prices up. The flow to the border is down. Crime and murder rates have plummeted. We've seen now we've seen deaths from overdoses now have started coming way down for the first time in many, many years. Joe Biden has left a country far better than he found it. He has been a loyal servant to the American people. And as all of you know, I've been one of his biggest boosters over these last few years. I was a very early supporter. He's been a great president, a consequential president. And I will say one other thing, that those three big bills that he passed. Oh, and another point, right? That we are more energy independent than we've been in decades. We saw more oil, gas, and renewables produced last year than any year in American history. And we produced more oil in America last year than any country in the history of the world. And so many consequential things have happened under his presidency. We've made so much progress. But my view is that when people look back at his presidency in 20, 30 years, I think what he'll be most known for in the future is the guy that went to bat against climate change in a way that no one else had ever done in modern history, in any country, in anywhere in the world. Joe Biden is the most consequential warrior against climate change that there's ever been. And the bill that he passed that is called the IRA, which I kind of hate, I want to rename it the most important climate bill that has ever been passed in world history. Joe Biden really has mobilized unprecedented resources to fight climate change. He's dramatically accelerated the energy transition that's so necessary for the planet not to warm. And I think that, I have been one of Joe Biden's biggest boosters, but if I have any criticism, is that he hasn't taken enough credit for what he's done on climate. It's deeply consequential. He rose to the moment in a time when we in America and the world are being challenged, not just on the democracy front, but here on climate change. And I think that his legacy as someone who may have prevented the planet from tipping into an unsustainable place because of his leadership is something that may be known in future generations. So I just want to take a moment together just to thank and feel our emotions about Joe Biden that we all have about what's happened over the last few days. It's been a deeply emotional period for us. So I'm just going to take a moment here and just let us sit with how we feel and the gratitude that we have for his extraordinary leadership. Thank you, Joe Biden, for what you've done and also for doing a thing that if he wanted to create the most vivid contrast that he could to the authoritarian and liberal impulses of the modern right by stepping down from power and not fighting to the death for his being a leader of the country, to stay in power was perhaps the most extraordinary thing he could do to confirm and affirm the democratic tradition here in the United States and show as an example to Putin and Xi and to Kim and to the other and Orban, these other authoritarian leaders about how we do it here in America, how our democracy works. There is no indispensable man in a democracy. We all are just citizens together. And Joe Biden reminded about us in such a powerful way, a lesson that's so central to our understanding about what a democracy is. And so, incredibly inspiring leadership from Joe Biden, our president, and also to have made the handoff to Kamala Harris so successful. He didn't just step down or announce that he wasn't running. He also facilitated the ability for her to hit the ground running and to have all that success that we've talked about. I'm very optimistic about where we are. I'm much more optimistic than I was even yesterday. The last set of polls that we got, right before the vice president became the candidate for us, showed her, most polls had her doing a couple points better than Biden over the last few weeks. There hasn't really been a lot of polling data about her because there didn't need to be. Biden was the candidate. But the polling data that we got over the last few weeks was encouraging because it showed that she was doing particularly well with younger voters and younger voters of color. I mean, some of the parts of the electorate that are so central to our coalition that the president has struggled with, and that it was very clear that she was bringing a lot to the ticket. It wasn't just, this was a Biden Harris coalition. It wasn't just a Joe Biden coalition. And so we had some inkling that if she ended up becoming the candidate, that first of all, that she would be stronger than I think many of us believed. We just didn't know. You don't know until you start getting data about where things are. And I was as if you read Hopium, I've been writing about this quite a bit over the last few weeks, that she's shown a lot more strength in polling than I think would have been the conventional wisdom. And so there was optimism that if there was a change that we would, have a good chance of being successful. And, what we saw in the last three high quality independent, polls that I trust, not all the, some of the garbage polls that are in the system, the last three polls taken before the change, she was up two over Trump in one and then down two in two others. And so, close competitive election, right? I mean, something we can live with that. And then today, we've started getting polling now of interviews done fully after the change on Sunday, right? We now have polls that have been taken, interviews done on Sunday night, Monday, even potentially earlier today. And there's now been four polls released today or in the last 2 days, and they have one of them, Morning Consult has her down two. The Ipsos Reuters poll had her up to. Yahoo YouGov had the race even, and Marist NPR had the race even. So in the polling that we've just gotten since the change, Donald Trump's lead has evaporated. And if you know the modest lead that he had in the election, it's evaporated, and that we now have a close competitive election. And I think what's so significant about this and why I'm so pleased with this data is that that's coming after the assassination attempt on the former president, after their Republican convention, after their choice of their, I think, a disastrous choice of JD Vance as vice president. And so you would assume that they would be riding high here and that they would, be a couple points up and be in a strong position. And remember that we haven't even had the full impact yet in polling of the rallying around Harris, right? Which is this event that we didn't know was going to happen and has been dramatic and energizing and exciting and is drowning out the Trump and the right wing in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. Uh, the right Trump's campaign got caught flat-footed. Their initial response to this was thin gruel and looking like they don't know what to do, and they're obviously not happy about it. Trump has disappeared over the last couple of days. He's been mad truthing. Yesterday he spent the entire day spewing all sorts of crazy stuff, but he hasn't been seen in public since Saturday, and staying off the trail for 3 full days. It's kind of incredible in a presidential election. I mean, Vance had a very kind of mediocre or crappy debut yesterday. I mean, it was sort of extraordinary at his first major event. One of the guys who introduced him said that if we lose the election, and by the way, when you introduce somebody, you never raise the prospect of losing. It's all about winning, right? So first of all, this guy was a dolt. But then he said that if we lose the election, there's going to be a civil war in America. I mean, just reminding us like just how bananas and crazy these guys are. And that this was somebody who they chose to be on stage with Vance yesterday, right? And so where we go in the polling is that we haven't had a series of what should be very positive events for us. This full kind of few days of this rallying behind the vice president, which is still kind of new and emerging, which I don't think we'll know the full impact of it for a few days. And then she's going to pick a VP, which will be, I think, an uplifting and positive moment, making clear that there's a generational handoff happening in the Democratic Party. And then we're going to have our convention. And if we're going into this period over the next few weeks where things are likely to be helpful to us and we could gain a couple points, right, out of all those events, and it's even today, that means we're more likely to be ahead at the end of our convention or in the next few weeks than they are. And all of a sudden we have a very different election. I mean, we're on offense, we're on the front foot. I think our Vice President Harris has done, I think, I loved her statement yesterday. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, imagine that she had to go out and speak in public 24 hours after this. And it was the statement that she made at the Wilmington headquarters was going to be analyzed and pulled apart and, as a test. And it was awesome. And it was her words, her narrative, her story. It wasn't something cribbed from the Biden campaign. She came out on fire yesterday. She started with this thing that she's going to be doing in all of her speeches is about, I was a prosecutor. I know what it's like to put bad guys away. I know what it's like to prosecute sexual abusers, assaulters like Donald Trump, and somebody who's committed fraud like Donald Trump, and somebody who's committed felonies, like Donald Trump. And I hope she gets to the point that she says as somebody who's committed the equivalent of treason like Donald Trump by stealing America's secrets. The way she went after Trump in that her first set of remarks yesterday was, into my mind, she landed more, punches against Trump than virtually any politician's been able to do since Trump, came into office. And this ran for office in 2015, and this positioning of her as prosecutor versus the felon, reminding us that she put bad guys away, that their accountability is coming. Oh man, this was awesome. And for her to have come out of the box with that. And then she talked about what she wants to do as president, the beginning of an agenda. We've got to give her time, right? I mean, she's having to build an entire presidential campaign from scratch, a narrative and a story, and pick a VP and redo the convention and build a campaign around her news story and her narrative. This is very hard. And they're going to come at her with hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising very quickly to try to define her. So there's an urgency for her to get her story out there. And so it's like she's having to do 6 months of work in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, right? But she's off to a great start. I mean, we have to be very pleased. And I think that what I liked the most about the way she described about what she wanted to do as president was the way she talked about the economy. I thought was really powerful, and about that we need to be on the side of helping people get ahead in their lives. And I thought her language on that was organic and strong and powerful. All of it felt like her. All of it felt like this came from her, and it's different language than Biden. I mean, the new campaign really began yesterday, and I think for her, what I was so pleased about was that it just felt like her story. She's confident, she's strong, she's ready, right? And so I feel really good. The speech she gave today in Milwaukee, very similar. I mean, you look at her body language and her confidence and her joy that she's having. It's just awesome, right? I mean, this is powerful stuff. And I want to say for the Hopium community, I've known the vice president for over 20 years. I mean, I was very involved in helping Gavin Newsom get elected mayor the first time he ran in 2003. And during that period, and I became close, I'm still close to Gavin, and he's an avid Hopium reader, by the way. But I became I opened up an office in San Francisco, and my old organization that I ran did a lot of work in Silicon Valley and in Bay Area politics. And I spent a lot of time out there, and I got to know this rising young star, Kamala Harris during that period. And when I ran for party chairman against Howard Dean in 2005, she was one of my national co-chairs, and she actually came with me to Sacramento. There was a debate in Sacramento in front of the regional DNC members and the public that was sanctioned by the DNC. And she came and spent the day with me working the DNC members, on my behalf. And so I've known the vice president a long time. I mean, longer than most people in Washington. And I can tell you that I remember having a dinner with her in San Francisco, and that I think was with me and my friend Chris Gurel, who was an advisor to me during that period. And I remember, having a 2 hour dinner with her and thinking that, in our business, there are people who've got it, and then there are people that don't, right? And I remember thinking of that dinner that Kamala Harris has just got it, that she's just got this charisma and this power and this self-assuredness. And I came away thinking like, man, she's got a big future. She's really strong, and she was super impressive. And we've stayed in touch over the years. She went off to do lots of remarkable things during this time. I spoke to her on the phone a few weeks ago. We did a catch up, and I'm really proud of her. I mean, I've known her long before she became even attorney general, and she's going to be a very, very formidable candidate. And today, I just want to. People have noticed that I haven't been using this phrase recently, but after the polling today, in every way imaginable, I would much rather be us than them. I mean, I am now back into a place where I think it's more likely that we win this election than they do. I wasn't there over the last few weeks. We had fallen behind, and Trump was a little bit ahead, and Biden was struggling. But we're in a very different place now. I mean, our party is unified and excited in ways that it's been a very long time, I think, since we've seen the kind of energy and intensity we've seen the last few days. We now have to put our heads down and go do the work and make sure we go win this election. The other thing I'm really enjoying about the Biden campaign, and I was emailing back and forth with Julie Rodriguez, the campaign manager, yesterday, and she's asked me to let one of the grassroots organizers running the campaign come speak to our community to talk about how people can volunteer, is this new emphasis in their public communications about volunteering, grassroots, making phone calls, writing postcards, all this stuff. This is a change. They know when I spoke to the vice president, to be very clear, the thing that she was most interested in was my discussion about the need to engage 2 to 3 million proud patriots all around the country, all of you who've been so central, all the work that you've been doing in phone calling and canvassing and donating money, is that all of that muscle that we've developed in recent years because of all of you and the work you've been doing, that we needed to more directly talk to you and speak to you and thank you for all the work that you're doing, that we would only win the election is if there were 2 to 3 million people on the vice president's team, right, or the president's team at the time, and her team too, and that she couldn't do it alone. And what you can see already in the last few days is there's been a huge change in the way the campaign is talking to all of you, right? And it's so welcome, because I think what she said to me, and then her top political advisor, Sergio Gonzalez, followed up with me afterwards. He said, the vice president was really wanted to, loved what you were saying about how we can only win if we let the people lead us there, right? And all the work that you do. And so they've been fascinated by this. We've had long conversations. I can see it in the change. Kamala Harris understands that she can't win this election without all of you. I know this from talking to her. I know this from talking to her staff. She is a grassroots, champion. I mean, she just did a video, for Network Nova, and my friend Catherine White, just at their conference a few weeks ago, thanking everyone for all the work that they're doing. So I think that I think this is a culture change that's going to happen in the campaign that is going to make it far more likely that we win. And I think it's going to make it far more enjoyable for all of you as well, as you do the work to help her win. We have an extraordinary opportunity, and I'm so excited. And then finally, I want to say that I think that the election is now fundamentally changed. I mean, not just the polling, but just the contrast that's going to be. There are going to be a couple things that I think are going to make this election immediately different. Number one, that the contrast between Trump now as being the oldest nominee for president in American history, an old man, unfit, unwell, extreme, delusional, all these things that he is, right? The ugliest political figure in American history. That contrast of his age and unfitness and his being unwell and extreme is much more apparent today when you remove Joe Biden, from the equation, right? When it's going to be Harris and whoever she picks as VP, Trump's problems with the electorate become much more pronounced and much more visible than they were before. You can feel it. And I think, by the way, he feels it. He disappeared over the last few days, right? He literally just disappeared. We haven't seen him since Saturday. And I think they're aware that this election got much harder for them. And I think he's aware that his problems, the two problems were just his ugliness and his extremism and his age and his craziness, his madness, all of a sudden becomes much more pronounced because of the contrast. The other thing that becomes more pronounced is, by picking JD Vance, he has committed his ticket to be, wild abortion extremists and, Handmaid's Tale level stuff. I mean, JD Vance is not just for no exceptions under any conditions. He's also against IVF, and he's also against no fault divorce. And, which I think is something that we haven't really grasped the absolute insanity of this no fault divorce thing that is now this new thing on the right, where there is video of JD Vance that is easily accessible to you. I've shown it on Hopium, where he says that women should stay in abusive marriages where they're getting beaten up by their husbands for the good of the children. I mean, what in the world, right? So he wants to make it harder for women to divorce men that are beating them and putting them in the hospital. I mean, what planet are we living on here? And this thing about abortion, I got asked about this in an interview I did in the New York Times today. And I said, it's not just about the gender gap in women, it's about men. I don't want my wife, my daughter, my sister, my daughter's friends, and all the women that are my colleagues that I work with to live in a world like that. I mean, it's about stripping the rights, fundamental rights and freedoms away of half of our population, people that we love, people that we work with every day, people that we are part of. And it's outrageous, this extremism that Trump and Vance are trying to push forward. This is literally Handmaid's Tale. JD Vance is like a character out of the Handmaid's Tale, right? And the Commander Vance, we should call him from now on, right? Not Shady Vance, but Commander Vance. He's even got the beard like the guy, the lead commander, and in Handmaid's Tale on the TV show. And so, I mean, this kind of stuff is the kind of stuff that causes a party to lose elections, and they should lose elections for a long time to come. I mean, not only are they a threat to democracy and all the stuff that we've talked about so much, but we have the threat of these guys is proximate and real, and we have to do everything we can to fight for our democracy, for our freedoms, for our future, for our kids and our grandkids in every way. And we've got to leave it all on the playing field, everybody. We don't have any choice. The stakes on this victory is not assured. We only win if we go do the work. We can win. This election got a lot better for us in the last few days. Kamala Harris has come out of the box unbelievably strong, confident, capable. The party's unified. We're ready to rumble, right? The polling in the Senate races continues to be really strong. The congressional generic, which is this measure of Democrats and Republicans, continues to favor us. The data that the House Democrats released today about their fundraising advantages in the battlegrounds is super encouraging, right? We've been raising tons of money. We're grossly outraising the Republicans in the House races. We also know that because of Harris's getting the Democratic family more enthused and excited, we're probably much more likely to flip the House seats in New York and California, making it far more likely that we're going to flip the House and take back the House from Mike Johnson, right? An extremist and an insurrectionist who's now the Speaker of the House. And so everything has gotten better in recent days. We should be super optimistic and enthusiastic. But victory is not assured. And I think victory will come if we do what we've been doing in all these other elections across the country, is if we put our heads down and we go do the work. I wanted to say one last thing to all of you, and I'm gonna read this because I think there are times when we even normalize their extremism, because in some ways it's so unbelievable, right? About what has happened to them and how mad and wild and crazy and extreme they become. But I want to just end with this, and then we'll open it up to questions. Here's what I think Trump, I mean, not only is Trump today running as a rapist, a fraudster, a traitor, and a felon, he's also running on an agenda that he and his Putin-loving vice president, Project 25 and Putin-loving vice presidential candidate, this is what they want to do if they're in power. They want Putin to win and the West to lose. They want the border to be in chaos and migrants to keep flowing into the country. They want Americans to lose even more rights and freedoms. They want the planet to warm faster, 10-year-olds to carry their rapist babies to term, for more women to die on an operating room table, for tens of millions of people to lose their health insurance. They want more dead kids in schools. They want verified rapists in positions of authority. They want a restoration of pre-civil rights era white supremacy. They want huge new tariffs, which will raise prices on everything, crush the middle class, and wreck the global economy, which has made us prosperous for decades. They want big new tax cuts for their wealthiest donors and tax increases for everyday people. They want books banned across the US, seniors to pay more for insulin and prescription drugs. They want governments to be free to pollute our daily discourse, Elon Musk, and harass our citizens. They want teenagers to work night shifts in meatpacking plants and not go to school. They want the minimum wage to stay at $7.25. They want mass arrests and mass deportations of immigrants long settled in the US. They want insurrectionists to be pardoned. They want to end American democracy for all time. That's what we want. You know, I mean, that's what we want. That's what they want. Oh my God, I screwed up my killer line there. That's what they want. What do we want? We want Kamala Harris and her VP to win, and we want to go kick MAGA's ass. And that's what we're going to do together, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Let me get to questions. So questions is put them in the box, not taking raised hands tonight. And what I'm going to do is scan the questions and try to come up with ones that are, that are most indicative of where people's heads are at. Yes, Karen, this is just a webinar. It's not a meeting in Zoom, so there are no cameras. Can Doug make an appearance? Not tonight, but I'm going to get him. I need to introduce him as a character into the Hopium community. I've been keeping him under wraps, but he sits with me when I write in the morning, and he's my muse. He's my writing assistant, and you'll get to know. He's an amazing dog, and I'm a dog guy, and I grew up with lots of dogs, and he's a special dude. I think let me just there's lots of great questions here. I think some of them I covered during the discussion here. Let me just see. Look, let's talk about the vice president, because that's coming up a lot. Let me start there. Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are 6 names that are getting kicked around, forgetting about questions about who's getting vetted or all that. I think that's kind of a sideshow. I mean, I think the 6 names are, the governors of, Andy Beshear in Kentucky and Roy Cooper in Tennessee. And I was at a dinner in Raleigh, the Unity dinner in North Carolina on Saturday. I was there with my friend Anderson Clayton, the party chair there, and Roy Cooper was at my table. I got to talk to him a little bit, and he did a phenomenal job in his speech. It was very passionate and compelling. He did a great job in selling the Biden agenda. Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania, Governor Whitmer, who I know has said she's taking herself out, but somebody pointed out to me Biden did that in 2008, and he still ended up becoming the vice president. Pete Buttigieg, I think, is somebody that is getting lots of mentions and buzz, and then I think Mark Kelly from Arizona, fighter pilot, astronaut, American hero, married to Gabby Giffords. Obviously they have a very compelling story, and I think that probably of those 6 people, the person who she knows the best is probably Mark Kelly from their time in the Senate. Maybe, but oh, you know what? They didn't overlap, did they? No, they did overlap. They did overlap. Um, and But her time in the Senate with him, and also it's a battleground state. And I also think that in a time when we don't have a lot of time, right? We don't have the normal time to kind of roll out her story and the VP's story. It's very compressed. Kelly, to me, has a very compelling story, just on the top line, right? Navy fighter pilot, astronaut, American hero, married to this unbelievably courageous uh, former member of Congress, Gabby Giffords, who was, shot by a right-wing extremist and out in a public setting in a mall in Tucson. And you should know Gabby. I mean, I was very good friends with the Congresswoman when she was in office. I even visited her in her Tucson campaign office the first time she ran. My family was there on vacation in Arizona, and we got to spend some time together. So I know Gabby much better than I know the senator. And I don't have a favorite. I mean, I think they're all going to be great, and I think we're going to end up with a really good VP. But the vice president has to decide. I mean, this is a very personal choice. It's not just strategic. She has to feel comfortable being a foxhole. These people could be together for over 8 years, and she has to feel comfortable with them. And I think that matters. So there is a piece of this that's polling and strategy. It's battleground states and here and there, but there's also a piece of it is like, who does she like? Who does she want to hang out with? Who does she trust? Who does she feel good about? Right. And there may be more. I mean, there could be more that are not on the short list. I think it would be very unlikely because there are other names being bandied about of former military leaders and Republicans. I think all those scenarios are very unlikely. There isn't a lot of time to do vetting. These have to be people who've been in public office for some time, I think. I also think it would just be impossible, given our conditions in the United States, for there to be a Republican vice president. Certainly, there could be a Republican in the cabinet. And I think, and if Liz Cheney, for example, goes out and busts her butt over the next few months for the vice president, then, I think we should assume there'll be, Republicans in the cabinet and some kind of pro-democracy coalition. I do think it's going to be important as the vice president goes through the checklist of all the things she has to do every day, that she has to work very hard to make sure that those never Trumpers and the Mitt Romney and the Liz Cheneys and so on are that she cultivates them and tries to bring them into her coalition as aggressively as she can. We need them. We need to build as big a coalition as possible for this election. And so those are just some thoughts in the VP, and I don't want to get my ahead of myself by talking about the cabinet too much because that would be bad luck. We have a long election and a tough election to go win. The Yeah, look, there's no candidate. Somebody's raising some issues. I mean, this is all going to get litigated and aired out, and there's going to be a thing here and there, but there's a lot of I don't this is going to be up at the end of the day. Only there's only one vote. One person gets to vote on the VP, right? And she's gone through this process. She knows it. She went through it on the other end, and I think those are, to me, the leading candidates right now for VP. But we'll see, and the let me just see. Yeah, look, somebody just mentioned about youth registration. One of the things that I think is happening, and we don't have, we don't know for sure yet. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence in the Hopium community and people that I know that young people are now much more engaged in this election than they were previously. I think that would make sense, and I think that we already knew from polling that in the last Harvard IOP poll, which is sort of the gold standard 18 to 29-year-old poll in the country, that vote intention in this election for young people was equal to 2020, which was a record-setting turnout for young people. And we also know that Biden had, at least in the Harvard IOP poll, a lead similar to what he had in 2020, and that there had not been significant erosion. And that also, contrary, I think, to sort of the understanding in the family, the Gaza issue is not a voting issue for the overwhelming majority of young people, as it is not surprisingly. I mean, the issues that usually matter in elections are healthcare, the economy, being able to make a living. This is very distant and far down on the list in all the polling that was done. And so this idea that there's been some kind of catastrophic event with young people is not true. But if Kamala can take where Biden was and improve it by 5 to 10 points, we're going to be looking at a remarkable performance by young people for us. And so I do think you're going to see more young people engaged. I think that she's also, this week creating distance between herself and the president's policies in the Middle East. And I think this is going to be the beginning of her, she is not going to be she's going to be Joe Biden's heir, but she's not Joe Biden's employee or vice president anymore. She's going to chart out her own course, and that's what we should expect. And there are going to be moments where she's not in the same place as the president, and they're going to have to work that out in the coming months. One of them is that when Bibi Netanyahu speaks to the joint session of Congress, she would have normally been the presiding officer. She will not be there for that presentation. And I think that she had a conflict, and she's going to honor that conflict. And I think you're going to start to see some distance there between the vice president and the president on the policies in the Middle East. These are all things that are going to come up very soon, tomorrow, next few days, right? Will be heavily debated. But one of the things that people have to realize is that her pursuing her own course is not being disloyal to Joe Biden. It's being loyal to him. And because the only way she wins this election is if she's Kamala Harris. If she's Joe Biden's understudy, why would anybody, that means she's not the president, she's still the vice president. She needs to now be the president. She needs to assert herself as the president. And she's no longer the understudy. She's it now. And so people should anticipate that there are going to be moments where they're no longer on the same page. And that's the only way we can win. And that should be expected, and not something that we should fear, because we shouldn't expect that Kamala Harris agrees with Joe Biden in every single thing. It would be ridiculous, right? But they've been a great team and a great partnership, and they've made that very clear in the next few days. But their roles are changing. And I feel, as I just want to say this, that speech yesterday that the vice president gave, I was so happy, because I really felt that the words were her own, the stories she was telling were her own, the way she was talking about issues was different than the way that Biden and the campaign talked about it. And that we need that to happen. She needs to grow and get big and strong, and not, be hesitant or worried, right? And she just went right there. She went right after Trump, right in the beginning. She made her case for herself. I put the video up on Hopium today. If you haven't read it, seen it, it's worth looking at. It's really powerful. I haven't watched the speech today, but I think she gave a very similar set of remarks. She's coming out of the box really strong. I feel really good about it. I also really like the frame she's using of forward backward, which is a frame that was not available to Joe Biden, right? But it is available to her, and it creates this generational contrast. It takes it out of politics. It's not left and right. It's forward and backward. Obama used this very effectively in his reelect in 2012, and I was actually part of the team and helped architect some of that language and that argument during the reelect in 2012. And it's very powerful because it removes us from politics and brings us together around forward progress against forces pulling us backward. And today, many of you even noted that there was this chant where we're not going back. That's a very powerful chant. I mean, and it was not something that was going to be easily available to Joe Biden. And that's what I mean. Like, this campaign already feels different. It's organically growing. It's doing its thing. Campaigns are, there's strategy in campaigns like chess, right? Where you're moving chess pieces. But campaigns are also like jazz, right? Where you have to improvise and you have to let things, you feel things from the audience and then you can get stuff back. When you watch the video today, and I put it up on my Twitter feed of that, when she said there's, we can't go back or whatever it was, and I don't even have it, I should write it down. You could see her hearing the crowd. You could see it, right? You could see it in her face that she's like, wow, this is working, man. This is like, I'm happy, like I'm coming out here day 2 and I'm saying stuff and people are going crazy and I'm connecting, right? And this is working. And, and you, as somebody who's now doing much more public speaking than I used to, going on TV and everything else, when stuff lands, right? Like you can feel it. And not just because of the thumbs up and the hearts, but you get the feedback. And she got very positive feedback today on where she's going. And so I do think this forward backward frame is powerful, and it's a huge problem for the Republicans because they actually do want to take us backwards. Donald Trump is old. He is nostalgic for a day that never used to be there. They are fundamentally a nostalgic, party for a day that, and want to drag us backwards into the 19th century, the 18th century, whatever you want to call it, away from democracy, away from rights and freedoms. They want a world of dominion and not freedom, right? And, I think she's already just day 1, day 2, she's already tapping into sort of powerful things that are in our discourse and our discussions. And I'm really happy about it. Like, I honestly, I just want to say, she's come out of the box so strong the last couple of days. As somebody who's been doing this for a long time, she's strong and powerful. She's confident, like she's wants to win this fucking election. And she's told everybody today in a tweet, like, I can't win this election without all of you coming to work. We got to knock on doors. I mean, she said, knock on doors, make our phone calls, right? And she did a direct link, not to give money, but to volunteer in the campaign, right? And that had never been done before by the Biden campaign. And that was, to me, a sign of how much she wants to win. This is about winning now. We have a big job to do together, and she's going to be a leader to get us there. Yeah, I want to just say that there's a lot of talk about the legal challenges and everything else. And my just view to all of you is, don't worry about that. It's above all of our pay grades. We have an election to go win. We've got work to go do. And remember, we have somebody who is now formally the second highest ranking law enforcement official in the United States, the Attorney General of California, as our candidate. And so in terms of all the legal shenanigans and horseshit that's going to come, I don't think we have to just rely on Mark Elias anymore. There's now, our nominee is, been somebody who's well-versed in, in criminal law and all sorts of law, and is, going to be a very able leader, and will bring, and her husband, was as Doug Emhoff has been a successful attorney. So I think that I don't really worry about all that stuff, because if we win this election by a lot, none of that stuff's going to matter. And I think that I will just say to all of you is that I think people are using this lawfare stuff, as somebody just mentioned. We're using it to spook ourselves a little bit, right? And because what they want is, they want us to be spooked. What the right wants is, they want us to be spooked. They want us to be scared. They want us to think that they have these superpowers. And yet what we've learned about Donald Trump in the last few days is that he's not a strong man. He's a baby man, right? He's a coward. I mean, the very first thing that he did, after Kamala Harris was, when Biden endorsed Harris, he immediately said he didn't want to debate anymore on that debate on September 10th, that he wanted to move it to Fox News, because he's a coward and a baby man, right? And we have to stop treating this guy like he's strong and has superpowers. We have to stop giving him powers that he doesn't have himself. What they want is, they want to be the Wizard of Oz. They want us to obey in advance. They want us to be scared and to be terrified and to crouch into the corner, that somehow Donald Trump has all these magical powers, that it doesn't matter what we do, they're still going to win. And all of us who sort of perpetuate that myth, are helping him win. And what we have to be is we can't underestimate him, but we can't overestimate him either. And I just want to say that when I look at Donald Trump, I think he's the biggest piece of shit that I've ever seen in American politics in all of my career. I am not scared 1 minute about that guy. He is weak and old and unfit and crazy and a madman and extremist agenda who treats people like shit. This guy is a rapist, a fraudster, a traitor, and a felon. We should not be scared for 1 second and be intimidated by him for 1 second. He's a baby man. He's not a strong man. We need to get this stuff out of our system. We are strong. They are weak. We have a great leader. They've got a ridiculous leader. Our party's been winning elections all across the country. They've been losing, right? We just saw in France and in the UK and Europe that the European voters, just like the voters here, did everything they could to prevent the fascists successfully from gaining power. The West, the voters of the West have been rising up and preventing the fascists from taking power. They just did it all over Europe, and they're going to do it. They've been doing it here for the last 2 years, and they're going to do it again this November. And what I would just encourage everyone here to do is to spend more time living in a place where we are powerful and strong, not a place where we're defensive and weak. This is in many ways the essence of the Hopium Project, which is that, what I learned during 2022 was that the red wave was a psychological operation perpetuated by the right, where they flooded the zone with these bullshit polls that try to intimidate us and scare us that resistance was futile, right? There was nothing we could do. The red wave was coming. We should all just go home and just accept it. And we didn't, right? We didn't accept the red wave. We went to work and we fought, and we ended up having a far better election than anyone thought. We cannot let them red wave this election too. We can't let this psychological thing where the red wave comes and makes us feel like there's nothing we can do, that we're powerless. We're full of power. We're American citizens. We're part of 2 to 3 million people who've been going to work and kicking their ass in election after election all over the country. We're powerful. They're the weak side, right? They're the party that's dependent on a handful of oligarchs. We're the family that is dependent on the good works, the passion, the love of country of the American people themselves. What could be more intrinsically American or small d democratic than that, right? And so we're on the side of history here. We're the strong party. They're the weak party. They're the ones who are trying to destroy everything that's made America great. We're the ones wanting to preserve it and advance it and to make sure that it's there for our kids and our grandkids. We are strong. They are weak. Get up every day. Write that on your computer screen, wherever you do your work, right? What's the Ted Lasso thing, right? What's the thing that he had right over the door? I'm now forgetting one of my own things, right? Whatever you need to do, ground yourself every morning when you're having your coffee or whatever you do in the morning in this notion that we are strong and they are weak. It will, I promise you, right? This is going to change the way that you approach everything that you're about to do over the next few months. And it will give you the strength and power and inspiration to go out and win this election for us. Let me go look at some questions here. The question about Obama is interesting, right? I have a feeling, where's Obama? Why isn't he endorsed? I have a feeling that Obama's waiting, and that they're going to do it as something that's going to be like a big news story, whether she goes to visit him or he visits her. I think they're waiting. I think rather than getting drowned out in all the other stuff that's going, because I think they must know from polling that it matters, right? And my assumption is, what I have been trying to promote in the chatter, is that it would be great if he did a 7-state swing by himself, not with her. I don't think he needs to be with her, but by himself the week before the convention. It would be amazing as a way of rousing our family up, right? I think you're going to see Barack all in here, right? And I'm not worried about it, and it's coming. I think they staggered some of these things. They had Schumer and Jeffries come out today. I think they wanted to stagger it because every time this happens, it's positive news for us, rather than dumping everything on the same day, right? Biden's got to do his speech tomorrow. They're probably waiting till after Biden does his big speech tomorrow night. By the way, we should all watch. It's going to be remarkable. It's going to be an historic speech tomorrow night. I think it's at 8:30 now. It's been changing today. Yeah, and I think they're going to be very smart. Let's say there are 20 to 30 endorsements that really matter. I mean, they got most of the labor unions endorsed already. Still a few more they're going to have to work on probably, right? virtually everyone in the country. And then there's going to be Taylor Swift or whomever, right? But I think the entertainment community is going to be jazzed. I mean, one of the things that I was reminded about today, I interviewed Will Rollins, who's running in California in a House seat. Phenomenal candidate, by the way. I mean, you'll see a video of him in a couple of days. And he reminded us that, Kamala's home when she was senator was in Southern California, and her husband, Doug, was an entertainment lawyer. And so I think you're going to see an extraordinary outpouring of the Hollywood community, the tech community that's still Democrat. I mean, Reed Hastings, who just announced today, the founder of Netflix, announced the $7 million contribution to the super PAC, his largest gift that he's ever given. I think you're going to see, the super PAC apparently got $150 million in commitments just in the last 48 hours. I think it's going to be 3 times that. I mean, I think the amount of money that's going to flow into her, because I think what's going to happen is that people will see Reed Hastings giving 7, so they'll give 10, right? They'll start outbidding each other in terms of this is the way this fundraising works, right? For any of you who've raised money. And I think that Reed knew what he was doing by jumping out so early, because I think Reed is a very influential and serious guy, respected guy. I mean, built Netflix, pretty remarkable thing, right? And so I think you're going to start to see the California business community, that is an entertainment community that is not in the right wing Elon camp, really start rallying in a major way for their hometown senator, right? I mean, I think we have to remember that one of the things that's about to be unleashed into our politics is the power of California. I mean, one of the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world, extraordinarily wealth and capable people. And California, has not had a president or, power. She's the most powerful leader for California in national politics since Ronald Reagan. And I think that we forget how meaningful this is going to be for her campaign, for her staffing out the administration. God, if this all works out, right, that the people of California are going to rally for her. They're going to rally for her candidates, right? They're going to rally. I mean, the Republicans, their job of keeping those seats in California got a lot harder in the last 48 hours. And so I'm really optimistic about that. And I think it's gonna really matter. Yeah, yeah, no, Will Rollins, any of you who are in Will's district or have supported him, I interviewed him today. I'm going to release the interview on Thursday. Man, is he impressive. Holy moly. He's going to win. He's going to be a great member of Congress. He's going to make us proud. Those are the kind of guys, when you meet guys like Will Rollins, you have your faith in the future of the party and the country are reaffirmed, right? He's an amazing guy. I was so impressed with him today. So smart, so articulate, so grounded, so capable, and going to be a great leader for us in the Congress. Let me just look and see if I can just maybe take one more question. Then I've just got some closing thoughts for all of you. Yeah, listen, on my site, what I've done is that you can now on my site I have a handful of things. I didn't really, when I started Hopium, I didn't know that I was going to be doing fundraising, but it's been really successful. And it's because many of the Hopium community members asked me to do it because they wanted the candidate they were giving to know they were giving to them because of Hopium. And I will tell you, I was just in North Carolina. I'm going to say 2 final things and wrap up, is that I was just in North Carolina, and the Hopium community is the largest investor in North Carolina politics this cycle in the whole country, outside of North Carolina. We've raised over $330,000 for the North Carolina Democratic Party. Some of that money came very early. We made a decision to go in early. This was a state, or the most important expansion state in the battleground. We had this dynamic new party chair, Anderson Clayton, who I felt could absorb the money and put it to good use, because it's how we've won in other places like Arizona and Georgia. The only way you can flip these states are with strong state parties. And so Anderson, I felt, had the opportunity, and we've raised over $330,000. And when I was there this weekend at their big unity dinner, people knew who Hopium was, right? The Hopium community had a brand. We were like, hey, whoever you guys are from all over the country, thank you, right? On our site, you can see a video that Anderson and I did where she thanked everybody for the contributions we've made. One of the things I was really proud of is that some of our money has gone into campus organizing. The college Democrats in North Carolina are hiring 80 staff 80, not 5, not 10, not 20, 80, right? Because there's so many young people in North Carolina. And so, Anderson's built an amazing program there. Roy Cooper has successfully passed the baton to Josh Stein. Josh was very impressive in his comments. Where they're running, Josh is running against somebody who's far more extreme than JD Vance and Donald Trump, even Mark Robinson, one of the most significant extremists in the country. So when you give money through Hopium, it's coming with a message about our values at the Hopium, and about optimism and hard work and grit. As I say, Hopium is not Hopium is hope with a plan, right? We just don't hope that the election is going to turn out well. We do the work to make it so. There's a grittiness about us, optimism, but there's also pragmatism here, right? And so that event this weekend, my 2 events I did down there, I came away from feeling like, man, were they fired up. I mean, people in North Carolina want to win. They understand, they are facing extremism. Their ticket there is one of the most extreme, tickets that we've ever seen in American political history. And I just would tell you, people in North Carolina are bringing it. And I felt really, really good about everything I experienced there, and very proud of Anderson, very proud of Josh Stein, and the whole team that's down there busting their ass to go win this thing. So part of the reason when you give money, the money you give through Hopium, none of that stays with me, right? It all goes 100% goes to the candidate. And of all the money that's come into the Hopium site since Hopium began, over 80% of it is gone to candidates. Only 20% has gone to me, right? I mean, I could raise much more money, frankly, for me, and make much more money off the site than I'm doing. But where I'm putting my energy is where it's needed, which is that it's much more important that you give Anderson Clayton $100 than you give it to me, frankly, right? I'm making enough money off the site. I'm doing fine, right? But, just so everybody understands, I mean, this is not a crazy moneymaker for me, but what we're doing is we're leveraging the power of this remarkable community to go kick their ass all around the country. And that's the most important thing to me. Let me close with some final thoughts for all of you, if you don't mind. So why are we here? It's a Tuesday night. It's 8 o'clock in the East Coast. It's still light out. Thank God I leave that window open because it's just still so nice. And it's actually been a beautiful day here in DC, after some really hot weather we had. And Tug doesn't really like the hot weather. Bulldogs don't do well in really hot weather. So why are we here? I'm here. Let me tell you why I'm here, and why I'm here in my son's former bedroom here talking to all of you, is that I'm here because of something Joe Biden talked about at his State of the Union address earlier this year, his compelling and fantastic State of the Union address that he gave earlier this year, is that he talked about FDR's speech that he gave in 1941. And he did this at the very beginning of the speech, by the way. He talked about FDR's speech that he gave in 1941, a State of the Union address, same podium, same place, many years earlier, 80 something years earlier, right? Where FDR started rallying the country on what became our entrance into World War II to fight the fascists, right? To defeat fascism. And I was struck by this because I knew a lot about this speech. And I was struck that Biden so directly alluded to it, because it was the speech that began the process of rallying America successfully to go fight Hitler and to fight the fascists. And by him alluding to this as an historical speech, right, he was making it very clear where his head was at about the moment that he was in March, it was early March of 2024. And that speech that he alluded to, the FDR speech in 1941 at the State of the Union, is also known as the Four Freedoms speech. And in that speech, FDR laid out his vision of what he wanted the world to be after World War II, which is a world that was driven by these four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, freedom from fear. My favorite is the freedom from want. I think it's such a beautiful phrase. And we know that FDR wrote these things himself. We know from history, he had a yellow pad where he wrote his speeches, and that yellow pad where he wrote those four freedoms the first time still exists. It's in the FDR Museum in New York State. And so FDR articulated that night this vision of the world based on freedom. And what he was setting up is that there was this battle between freedom and dominion, as I call it. a vision of the world based on freedom versus a world based on dominion, where a country or a person had control over another. And that theory, or that vision that FDR had, of the four freedoms, of a world based on four freedoms, those four freedoms became the basis of the Atlantic Charter, which is the thing that was signed by Churchill and FDR that cemented the transatlantic alliance that won World War II. Those four freedoms then became the basis of the United Nations Charter in 1945 that created an understanding in the world that nations were sovereign, that one nation could not have dominion over another nation, and that freedom had to prevail in international law, and there was sovereignty. And FDR, by the way, fought to make sure that the European powers gave up all their colonies as part of this desire to create this world based on sovereignty and freedom. And all the European, as part of this new world that FDR imagined, that all the the colonies around the world and the European colonial powers were given away, and there started to be, over time, including in India in 1948, the beginning of a world that was without colonialism, freedom, right, sovereignty. And then in 1948, those four freedoms were the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was negotiated in part by Eleanor Roosevelt, which became the first time that in international law we put the concept of human rights, or the freedom of people to not have one person have a dominion over another, into international law. Previously, it had been nations, and now it was people. And so those four freedoms really became the foundation of the modern world that we all live in all these 80 years later. And that world, the world of the four freedoms, the world of Pax Americana, the world of NATO that Biden was talking about just a few weeks ago, has created a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive than during this period of the four freedoms and the Pax Americana. We've seen literacy rates around the world triple during this period, meaning that far more people can do and contribute and pursue their dreams than ever before in human history. We've seen more people live under democracy today than have ever lived before. We've seen life expectancy go from 45 years to 71 years, an incredible advancement in human progress. And we've seen extreme poverty plummet while populations around the world have exploded, right? There's never been a better time to be alive than during this period of the four freedoms and Pax Americana. And what's important for us as we get ready to go win this election over the next 4 months for Kamala Harris is that golden age in human history, the fact that there's never been a better time to be alive, was something that we did. The Democratic Party of the United States did that. We imagined that world and then made it so. We created a golden age in human history. There has never been, in my view, a more consequential force for good, political force for good in all of human history than the Democratic Party of the United States. We are part of that legacy, and that world of freedom, of opportunity, of unprecedented, of this golden age that we all live in today, is being challenged by Russia and Iran and China and other forces that want to return to a world forward and backward, right? To return to a world of dominion and not a world of freedom. That's what this election's about. And we know the reason we're going to all leave it on the playing field these next few months is that we know in our bones that we are not going to let the freedoms and the opportunities that we have, the freedoms that we've had because of the Democratic Party in this golden age in human history, we are going to work to make sure those same opportunities and those same freedoms are there for our kids and our grandkids and the kids and the grandkids all across the world. That's what this election's about. The stakes are unbelievable. They could not be higher in many ways. And the reason why I'm so optimistic that we're going to win is because when our party was called in the 1940s, we answered that call and we rose to defeat fascism and then built a world around freedom and not dominion. And we are being called again. What Joe Biden was saying in that State of the Union again is that he was saying, and I wish he was a little bit more direct, but what he was saying to all of us is that our party and our nation is being called again to go beat the fascists, right? That's what this election's about. We've been beating the fascists for the last several years. The Europeans, the French, and the English just beat the fascists in these last few elections. Now we got to go beat the fascists once again. And part of the reason I am so confident we're going to win is because I've watched what you have done. You have all answered that call, and all that work that you've been doing, the calls, the postcarding, the canvassing, the donations, sitting on Zooms like this and getting smarter and becoming more effective information warriors for your democracy. All these steps you're taking, you are already answering that call. This is why we've been kicking their ass, because we have a far more powerful team because we have all of you. And so let's get to work, everybody. Let's be excited about what we've seen over these last couple of days. Kamala Harris is a strong, powerful leader who's off to a great start. Donald Trump looks like a crazy old orange baby man sitting on his golf cart somewhere. We're going to go kick his ass, win this election, preserve our democracy, and make sure that our democracies and our freedoms and our future are there for us and our grandkids and our kids and our grandkids. That's why we're here at the Hopium Chronicles. Thanks, everybody, so much. Let's go win this thing together. Take care.